Planning a wedding shouldn't feel overwhelming. The Knot brings everything together in one place. Vendors who get your vibe, a custom planning checklist, guest list tools, and a free wedding website that syncs with it all. So instead of juggling a dozen apps and spreadsheets, you can actually enjoy getting married. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
So we are going to kind of have a live roundtable discussion / live episode of Dr. Rimby's Arts and Culture podcast, The Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And this is kind of a sub-series of episodes called Teaching the Humanities in the 21st Century, where a lot of our conversations focus on what does AI look like in the classroom. That's like one of our leading questions, because it's something that we can't ignore. We know that there are professors in the humanities, and this is across a wide range of disciplines, who are aware that students are using AI, and maybe don't know how to combat that. And if they don't want to combat it, how are they integrating that into a classroom where kind of experimenting more and reckoning with what AI looks like in the humanities in the 21st century. So I guess we'll show you a little bit of what the podcast looks like. And then we'll jump into some general discussion questions. I guess this is open to everyone before we get into more specific episodes. And we can take this, besides being used by students to write papers, how has AI become a threat to teaching in this field? Any papers?
So, well, I can start. Sure. So I think for me, I think the threat is that mostly it feels like students are interested in outsourcing thinking, which I don't think can really be done, right? So I think, a lot of students do use it to write papers, and there's the threat that they're going to use it all the time. But my pitch to them always is that you can't really outsource thinking, right? Like this idea of critical thinking, how important it is. And also, there's also this risk when they use AI all the time, there's this risk of homogenization. So I see that all the time where people are, submitting answers to things, and I'm like, okay, I think that AI wrote this because it sounds way too polished for especially my undergrads, especially my first year writing courses. Like, there's no way you're not making comma splice errors, And so it's definitely clear that they're using it. But then when I see like multiple papers and they're all kind of say the same thing, especially with like discussion board posts, I'm like, yeah, it's interesting that every single person thinks exactly the same way, which is not the case. So, I think those are kind of the, the risks that come, is that people are like outsourcing thinking. And I think that if you start to take away critical thinking, it really just, minimizes the whole point of teaching, education, and, the humanities.
So how would you exercise that in the classroom? Not exercise. What would you do with students to try to break that up?
Yeah, so I guess this may speak to a later question, but I think for me it's really important to understand the motivation behind why students are using AI, because I think that actually opens up a whole deeper conversation with the student, So if the student is using AI because they want to get an A or because they've run out of time, then the conversation could be like, let's talk about time management, right? Like, let's talk about what we can do to help you manage your time better so that you don't feel this intense pressure to get it all done. Or if you really want to get an A, then, where does that come from? Are your parents pressuring you? Is it because you are doing poorly in all your other classes? And I think it just really opens up a conversation and also an opportunity for rapport and like a deeper relationship with the student. So that's kind of how I approach it.
I think one of the other challenges is students not doing the reading themselves.
Yes.
So before you could go to a site and you could, look up a summary of a text and you could see, discussion questions, plot overviews, chapter overviews, and so on. But it's just so much easier now. And at least those, in many cases, those sites are actually put together by faculty, psychology professors who do that on the side. So at least you know the information is probably pretty accurate, reasonable, and it did pose questions, it didn't answer them necessarily, right? But now, if you just pop a question in, you can get a plot overview, you can get character analysis. So I think the other threat is having students actually doing the reading for our classes that we're asking them to do, really not doing the reading. And I would agree with what you're saying, that part of it is certainly the burden on students, that working a lot, having, maybe taking 5-6 classes at a time, and, trying to do all the work. If they're taking a lot of English classes, something we've been talking about in the English department at Seton Hall is, why are a lot of papers due the last 2 weeks of the semester, which many of them are? This is not helping the situation, right?
Yeah.
Can we think about other ways to parse out the work so we can ease the burden on students? Because you're right, they'll often do this because they feel that there's no alternative and they're under the gun.
Well, go ahead. I mean, just one thing, I stole at least half of this idea from Mary, so I need to get credit where it's due. But having students do presentations in class that then lead to their longer paper, so that there's and it's better for me for grading because I have 2 long papers a week instead of 20 in the end of the semester. But also better for them, because they're not doing everything at once. But the other piece of it is that they have to be ready to answer questions about the material. So they're responsible, it's in a Chaucer course right now, so they have to have read their Canterbury Tale backwards, forwards, and upside down, and their 3 critics, because I and the other students will be asking them questions, and they need to be fluent enough with the material to be able to answer the questions, which is, they can't anticipate the questions and ask them of AI before they come in the room. So that has been one thing, and I think it's been working. It's a little harder with upper level English majors who I think are more inclined to do the reading and writing themselves because they went into English because they like that. But certainly there's already been one student who used AI for a shorter paper, so we've had to have a conversation about how Grammarly is in fact AI, and there are other ways to improve their grammar, like take your paper to the writing center and actually learn it. So
I just want to go back a little bit to something that Balkun said, which is that students aren't doing reading, which also may tie into something that you said, Stefanie, which is that students are maybe using this as a means to an end because they're fearful of failing or of not getting an assignment done on time or of not sounding very smart during a class conversation. So they're going to AI to get the ideas, so you're not thinking, so you're not reading and you're not thinking. So what are you here for? Do you think, and this is whether you're pro or anti-AI, do you think there's a space in the classroom where AI could be used to get students to be more immersed in reading, so maybe they feel more prepared to do that assignment, so they're not approaching it with fear and then at the last moment?
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Every rep starts the same. Your limits are real, but so is your potential. New unrestricted power training gear from Lululemon, built with our most powerful fabric. Every push is supported, so you can drive through the hardest presses. Every squat and lift, unrestricted, flexing and stretching for max range of motion. In the gym, you don't know what you're truly capable of, yet. Get into unrestricted power and find out. Now online at lululemon.com.
Yeah, oh, certainly. I mean, I have to say, honestly, I have not really done a lot with AI in my classes at this point, but I do agree that it's essentially inevitable. I think we do have to teach them how to use this, how to use this tool ethically. I think that's really the bottom line for any discipline at this point. How do they use it ethically to actually help their thinking? I will tell you, it has taken me a long time to get to this point, right? Because we're talking about, what was it, fall of 23? January of 23, it's fall of 22 when ChatGPT burst on the scene. So we're talking about a little over 3 years of trying to figure out what do we do? How do we do this? I do faculty development at our institution, and I keep describing myself as having to be sort of like Switzerland. I got one group of faculty who are like, gung-ho, yay, let's teach them how to write good prompts. I've got the other people on the other side like, hell no, we're not doing that. And so slowly I'm starting to think about, what is it going to mean? I will say quickly, though, that I actually asked my grad students this semester, so what would be reasonable ways to use AI? And they were like, there are none. There are absolutely none.
I think you're one that I thought was sort of intriguing, and I haven't tried it myself, and I don't want to put it on my students before I try it myself, but to put whatever the text that we're reading into, either whatever AI method you're using, and ask it to ask you questions. So to prepare for being asked questions about it, to have it ask you questions that you then practice answering, was, and again, you could just as easily find lots of questions about most texts, on Google somewhere. But if the use of AI is inevitable, that to me seemed like one potential use that might be interesting. Here's Shakespeare's sonnet number 116, ask me questions, right? And then to try to answer them.
I think there's actually a professor that I have right now at Kean that's kind of making us do the same thing. She's very careful about, making sure that whatever text that is that we're putting into a large language model, that is not a text that is a copyrighted text. Like this has to be something that's open and in the domain, because we don't want to be stepping on
Mostly
it's so scary, right? That we have to think about that.
5 centuries ago, so
yes,
it's easier for those of us who are in the early lit world.
For that,
as an early American, it's on the same note.
And that's what's so amazing is that there are so many ways that it can be helpful when there are ways that we can use it properly. But personally, I find it difficult when I'm reading about these things. Where's the line? It's great. This is the last general question before we jump into introductions. Before we jump into individual questions and introductions, if anyone here is familiar with all these wonderful people. But from the professor's perspective, have you considered the situation of if AI poses a threat to your actual position as a professor? Maybe not you personally, but to the profession of being an English professor or a writing professor, someone teaching medieval or early American. Writing, drama.
Yeah. So I think yes, for sure. The professor's role could theoretically become obsolete with AI, because now there's a lot of AI teaching and performing education, and you can go online and just get educated through AI, and they're even having bots that look like people, talking to you. So I think theoretically that is a possibility. However, what I would like to think about, obviously I am a professor, so I would be, very remiss if I said there's no way I'm no longer valuable, because I think that we as professors are. I think that it just forces us to change what we emphasize and kind of our approach to teaching. And I think in some ways that forces us to kind of evolve also, right? Because sometimes everyone in any job gets stagnant, right? You're kind of I'm just going to teach the same thing in the same way every semester, because we're overwhelmed and there's so much to do, and I don't want to change my syllabus or my curriculum because that's a whole huge new task. But I think that AI kind of forces us as professors and people in higher education to kind of do that. It forces us to say, what do we need to do to kind of really focus on this idea of critical thinking and why our work matters and what we can do to change it. And I think this, the previous question about how to kind of implement AI in the classroom also becomes really relevant, right? This idea that, I say, I am pro AI. I think that there's a lot of benefits from AI, and I think it's also inevitable, so why not just embrace it? But I think for my classes and with my students, I always say, you can always use AI to outline and to brainstorm. And I also, start to implement different ways to actually use it as a tool, right? So I'll say I haven't done this as thoroughly, but I'm gonna try to do this next semester, where I actually have them either write an essay using AI, and then I'll have them edit it, edit AI's version. So what has worked in this essay that AI has done well, and what hasn't worked, and to kind of highlight those, through color coding and all those different things. Or reverse, write an essay and then ask AI to edit your essay, and then highlight specifically, write a reflection on what AI has, highlighted as something that is a good revision and something that is maybe not such a good revision. And then also just to also to use it to role play scenarios. So, you can say act as a first year writing instructor, or act as, a neurologist, or whatever the, subject matter is. And then also I think it's also a good way to kind of generate this idea of asking good questions, right? Because you need to supply good prompts to AI to get a really good answer. So I think it also encourages students to start to think about what is a good question and how to kind of reframe that more globally and holistically.
Well, I'm just thinking maybe we should do more in-class writing, because I'm pretty convinced that students are not doing most of the reading. And I've dealt with the time management issue by having short weekly writings, but I still think students are just grabbing a snippet from AI and dropping it on the page. So I wonder whether we even have to go back to typing out passages and distributing those in hard copy and having students write in class, because otherwise I'm not convinced that they're reading at all, not at all.
Yeah, something I just noticed is I just assigned Antigone. Well, assigned Antigone had students split into groups reading excerpts of criticism from, different perspectives. And it was really clear which students showed up, and their group had met, talked in class, prepared, and then which had seen the text for the first time because they were silent, just reading.
Right.
Which, in one way, I'm happy that they're reading, right? So, but I also think, what Jan and everyone's saying here, it's kind of thinking of methods that, reading aloud in class, things that we had gone so far in the digital technology that I'm trying to find the in-between. I have physical writing journals, but I also want them to engage with the limits of Claude or AI prompting. What does it do for you that you can't do without brainstorming with your fellow students? And having those ethical conversations forefronted instead of hiding those conversations, trying to be more, intentional and centered about the methods.
Can't AI imitate a student's writing? So a student could ask AI, write like a student about Antigone. And then how are we going to know?
There's a level of validity to AI and AI writing that if we stress the need to be very specific, to include quite a lot of close reading, to include really specific examples that AI won't do, and then you can face the problem of not knowing whether it was AI or a student, but it's still not doing what you asked for. And that at least makes knowing how to approach grading it a little easier. To say, this paper is totally vapid, has none of the specific quotations that I asked for. I don't even know that you've read the story based on it. It doesn't matter whether they don't know the story or AI doesn't. There's no story there. So that's, I think, one thing. One thing somebody said to me recently, my husband works partly in ed tech, and said, AI isn't actually getting better. They keep saying it's going to get better, but it hallucinates just as much as it ever did. And, it has all the same problems, that it's not really improving. So it's not getting that much harder to catch. It's still, all of the references or citations tend to be wrong. So there are certainly ways to find out if it's likely to be AI that way.
Yeah. Or I had an example where a student was writing about the yellow wallpaper and the characters' names were completely off base. So, right, if a student isn't even rereading the essay that AI generates, they're not even engaging in revision. That's a problem.
Tell me the story about the person who gave the student two versions of the paper written by AI and their own paper, and said to the student, which one did you write? And the student couldn't tell them.
Yeah. One of my colleagues did that.
I actually did something really similar, where I took rough drafts from students, and I actually just read the same. I read the passages aloud because it's not theirs, and I could tell that it was AI. So I read it out loud to them, and then I'm like, "What's the problem here?" And they were and then at least my second class was willing to acknowledge. My first class was just shaking in their boots because they were terrified. And then my second class said it's all the same point. I'm like, right, it's all the same. And I think they really kind of woke up to that. And I even picked out like, I guess like a line in there that was like almost like a microaggression from ChatGPT or like Claude or like an AI. I like picked that out and I said like, this line is like, not only did it appear in like 3 papers, it was like a microaggression essentially.
No, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. There's something really interesting you just said that Dr. Balkun actually brought up on a recent episode of Faculty Matters, where she said that we are so used to whenever we read things, sorry, now you know if I'm misquoting. When we read things, we just we automatically assume that they're true because we're reading them. Right. That's correct. Oh, because we're reading something.
Everything in print is true.
Right. But now we're entering an age where absolutely not. Everything that we read is not true. And so a student could be reading something and seeing that there's microaggressions in something that ChatGPT wrote for them, and now they're carrying those kinds of prejudices with them out to the world because they're like, oh, well, I read it on ChatGPT, and I'm not considering that it could be hallucinating information.
Yeah.
And then going on and spreading that.
Yeah. In this case, it was about a raisin in the sun, and I was just like,
oh,
yeah. I was like,
oh, that could be very funny.
Oh yeah, like that was like, I'm like, this is out of line. This is like really inappropriate, and like 3 people left that in there.
How are you defining a microaggression?
Hold on, Dr. B. This is an excellent question. We're going to have to save it for the end. So we actually are going to show a brief clip of an episode of the Ivory Tower Boiler Room that is going to tie together Dr. B and Dr. Rimby's discussion points. And then
not really much of a point in getting to everything if we're not collectively understanding it.
Well, I think it's also like, in my opinion, a difference between a collaborative professor and like a student-centered professor and an egotistical professor. Like someone who just wants to show that they know every exact word of whatever their specialty is. Like, I'm going to teach you all as students that I'm an expert, and I'm going to pat myself on the back.
Yeah.
Which I just don't have time for, but that's, I'm just not interested in the lecture model. I think it's really outdated, and I think it's a very self-flagellation of teaching.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest.
And as an anxious undergraduate, I'm embarrassed to say, long for those lectures because I felt like, oh, now I have a body of knowledge. But as you can see, I moved away from it because it doesn't really teach critical thinking. But it models, I mean, it has one function in that it models how the expert can do a close reading, you know, but I'm so grateful to hear that you don't like it because I was saying yesterday, I always felt guilty in not doing what my old white professors did. They were up there at the lectern. I don't know how it was at Pratt and Columbia, but up at the lectern, and then you just took note. I felt like I could have been a secretary by the end. Yeah.
Amen to that.
Oh, not the Beverly Hills house.
It was the same.
That's it, that's
So I'm actually going to jump in with the introduction for Dr. Rimby and Dr. McKiethen. Andrew Rimby is a literary scholar specializing in queer 19th century American and British literature. He received his PhD in English from Stony Brook University. He is a part-time professor at 3 New Jersey universities, here at Seton Hall, also at Kean, Weisl, and at Montclair. When he's not teaching and writing, he hosts the arts and culture podcast, The Ivory Tower Boiler Room, which has been listened to and watched by more than 700,000 people. His publications include Talking Back to Whitman in 19th century gender studies, Walt Whitman and queer theory in 19th century literature criticism, and the recent article, A Kiss from Walt Whitman and Whitman and Oscar Wilde's about Whitman and Oscar Wilde's queer literary relationship. Yay, and lesbian review. I'm sorry that I.
That's a tongue twister.
Certainly listening. Jen Balakian teaches literature and writing at Kean University. She received her PhD in English from Cornell University. She has published essays about American drama, a cultural studies book about the plays of Wasserstein, written 2 prize-winning screenplays, and hosted the first international conference at Kean titled Why American Plays Matter, which was funded by the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. Her recent play about the transmission of trauma across generations, titled Dreams on Fire, had a professional Zoom production in 2023. She wrote a chapter on teaching all my sons in the 21st century. In 2025, she reviewed the Broadway production of Our Town for the Wilder Journal, and her new novella, The Twilight Swim, will be published in June 2026. Not full, but really so. I'm so glad that they're here, and these questions are going to be more focused on them, and you can keep their clip in mind as you're hearing what they have to say. For Professor Rimby, what practices have you found useful to make students feel like they don't need to be using AI in their courses?
Thank you, Ameenah. First, at the end we can clap for Ameenah, but I'm so happy that, we have someone from my alma mater at Kean, but also an undergraduate student who's been such part of the podcast, co-hosting, to be here chairing. I'm so grateful that she gets to do this. Okay, well, I think that whole student-centered approach has really helped me position, like I talked about physical writing journals, but I also think I really love having the students do popcorn reading, taking time to analyze certain passages in class, whether it's Antigone, and I'll cast one student as Ismene, one as Antigone, someone can deliver the Greek chorus monologue. That has really helped, I think, just getting the students shifting away from the technology. Like I try to use the class time to not have them go on their laptops. Like I'll even now be very deliberate and say, okay, close your laptops. Sometimes I play a trivia game with them because I have extra pencils and bookmarks, and quiz them and say, okay, put your cell phone away, and I'll do it at the beginning of class. And I realize that the majority of them then don't go on their cell phone after that. So it's kind of like a way to decenter them away from always being on Canvas. Because I try to use the Canvas more to model assignments outside of the class, so that when they're here in person, it's, their discussion, their knowledge.
This episode is brought to you by Subaru. Go further in a long-range Subaru hybrid with up to 597 miles per tank in the Crosstrek hybrid and up to 581 miles per tank in the Forester hybrid. Subaru. Love goes the extra mile. Visit Subaru.com/hybrid to learn more. Range based on EPA estimated combined fuel economy and a full tank of fuel. Actual mileage and range may vary.
Just the tips.
Just the tips?
Stops those split ends, lickety split. Look at those ends, they are amending.
Now that's what I call a happy ending.
Red Kit ABC, hair bandage balm.
Their experience of the text and bringing that to the conversation.
Having those computers.
Yes.
Do you feel like there's been one method that maybe has been more effective, like writing in the journals has been more effective maybe than playing the trivia games?
Yeah.
Or maybe they were completely up.
Yeah, the trivia games definitely are very plot-based.
I'm of many.
Yes. Yes. Ameenah was in my Brit Lit 1 class, so she was witness to that. And I think the trivia games are a good model of, some of them are really happy that they're not quizzes. But it's also just the exciting of gamification in the class. Yes. But I think the writing journals have really helped them document their close reading. And I used to be more discussion board based, and I've kind of shifted away from discussion boards, unless it's virtual or hybrid. But I'll use the discussion board more, okay, you're going to be submitting your early draft drama essay in 2 weeks. By the end of this week, I will give you the option to post your thesis statement so I can give you feedback and ideas for how to craft this argument. And again, I think that's another way that even Angela and Mary had spoken to. The more you engage them in the process of writing early, they know that you're looking at their work. They know that you're witness to their process. And they're not going to, I really think it's coming out of procrastination and anxiety that they're turning to AI to do all the thinking for them.
That actually your answer leads me to the next question I have for you, which is, and this could be because of the journals, but how are you getting to know student voice so that in the event that they are using AI, that you can really trust that you're making the correct differentiation and decision. You know, if you go to approach a student that you think is using AI, you don't want to approach them and then be looking like a bad guy now because they actually have and can prove maybe the editing history that they really written this. But it was just so good that you're like, oh, maybe this was influenced by AI. So how are you teaching yourself, you know, to get to know student voices in the classroom? Is it because of the journals or are there other methods that you're using?
No, good question. Thank you, Ameenah. I would say the journals, but also having them do mini group presentations. Mm-hmm. And I think like as much as, you know, writing is definitely a skill we're teaching and the critical thinking through crafting an argument, I also think the rhetoric of the oral presentation is important. Yes. And hearing them be able to defend their ideas in front of the class. So I try to also have them present in mini groups and each have to speak, that they're able to talk complex ideas out loud as well. But I would say like the problem, and this is what I would be so interested to hear from you all, is the disengaged student who just doesn't come to class. Yeah. I feel like I've lost a third of students. I know. Well, and then like that's the thing is I've like lost a third of students in like almost every class who just haven't come to class again. And I try to reach out, but you know, my philosophy is I can only do so much. Right. You know, I have like 110 students or 20. So, you know, I'll reach out if I don't hear from you. Like now, in my opinion, that's on you as the student. But yeah, they'll try to present all this work at the end of the semester, and then that becomes an issue of trying to figure out how can I accurately grade work that I have never seen you like craft throughout the semester. Yeah. And I don't know how to stop that.
That you're willing to grade it.
Yeah. I try. It depends. It depends how late it is.
The situation.
Yeah. My husband would say I'm a little too fair because he hears me during office hours.
I think it sometimes depends on why it's late. I mean, if you know a student's been struggling all semester, it's very different from like you haven't seen them in 4 weeks and then they show up with all the work they haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, circumstances govern that a lot.
Yes.
And that the work's never going to be good, but in some cases it's going to be done, and that's enough.
Yeah, if it's like an emergency situation. Yeah, that's it.
See, that's interesting. For some students, accurate doesn't necessarily mean the same thing. That's true, right?
Accurate doesn't mean no.
Accurate doesn't always mean the same thing. So things can be, these are the facts on paper, but am I hearing you very clearly? Do I think you really believe these things? Is this a good paper? Am I engaged? Versus, are you saying all of the right things?